Hi, everybody. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese. I'm here with my co-host, Nick Olson. Nick, it's been a minute, but we've both been in the film room at least a little bit, and understatement of the century for me. But we're gonna record our episode on JJ McCarthy, going through a scouting report on JJ McCarthy. We figured for at least McCarthy and Turner, we're gonna do individual episodes, try to give it as much credence as we can. We'll see how long we end up going. I have a feeling it's gonna be, a pretty decent chunk, even if it's not our feature like hour and a half length episodes. But yeah.
We only have one guy to talk about, but luckily there's a lot to say about this guy. I mean, he's hopefully the next quarterback of the future of the Minnesota Vikings. So, and I put in like a good amount of work, but you in particular, Matt, I'm impressed and a little scared. The level of, I mean, for those who aren't aware, Matt charted literally every single a snap of McCarthy's last year, 15 plus games. And not when I say charted, I don't mean like. Matt, you were charting what? Like the field, the concept, the play they were running, like the protection, where the ball was placed, and like he's got like an Excel spreadsheet with like 25 columns or something. Like
yeah, I got to, I believe, AA in the columns on the Excel spreadsheet. There's like down distance, but like the big ones are like which hash they're on, formation, so just under center shotgun, whatever, play action type, all that sort of stuff. If you want to check that out, it's not out yet. It'll probably publish next Wednesday at Zone Coverage. I've got a big Google Sheets sheet that'll be linked in the piece where I go over some of my charting data. So you will be able to access all that eventually. It probably won't be out at the time of recording, but look for the Wednesday after, I would say. I'm still working on writing the piece, obviously. But
see, that's why you guys listen to Kindred Skulls. That's our value proposition for you, because we're like completely insane. Like, don't get me wrong, there's like a million podcasts out there, and there's like a lot of Vikings podcasts, and I listen to all of them and I love them all, but like there's only like one Matt Freese who's such a sicko. He's gonna chart across 27 categories every single like other people are not putting in this work in the film room. So we're excited to get into it and actually talk about the fruits of our labors. Because I mean, I can't. I've watched a lot of JJ McCarthy games. I have not done quite the level you have, Matt. So I'm actually really curious to hear your thoughts on him as we dive in. So a lot to get into.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like, there's like honestly, frankly, most of the data that I have is accessible through PFF. If you know where to look, right? Like, I'm basically trying to do what PFF is doing. I think there's a little bit more detail in there, particularly with the route concepts, with the number of reads that he's going through, and some certain like evaluative sentences that I have, right? Or like evaluative.
I don't think PFF. I think PFF doesn't go into this level of detail. Like, I think with your charting, you can actually get a good sense of what happened, what went right, what went wrong. With PFF, it's kind of just like you aggregate the data, and they can do cool things with that data, but also I think there are a lot of limitations. Like PFF, you're putting in a lot more work on one play, and this is no offense to PFF.
Also, I have a comment on every single play. Some of it's just like PFF, it's a kneel down, but
Hey, here's my unpaid intern. You got 30 minutes to get through the entire game. Like, they don't have time to like tell you if it's like what the play they're running, because they're not even they're not charting the coverage. Like, they don't have time to like. They just got to like get through all the data as quickly as, because it's like a lot. I mean, PFF grades literally every player of every snap of every game, so like that's a lot of data to get through. And then only you, Matt, is like you're like spending the actual time to, and especially with quarterback, you really need to spend like it can take 20 minutes to go through one play with a quarterback because there's so much that's going on that takes a while to figure out. So that's why digression, but I think. Once your stuff publishes, it's going to be really cool for folks to look at. So
yeah, I'm gonna talk it down, but that's me trying not to.
It's my job to talk you up, man.
But no, first of all, thank you very much for that. Second of all, let's dive into JJ McCarthy, and I've got some obviously a bunch of charting data that I've pulled together that I'll supplement this with. But I think the primary thing we look for, and the primary thing I care about personally, really, is the scouting report, right? Like, who is this guy from a football perspective? Where is he at in his process? and what coaching does he need, or what does he need to improve on or learn in his game to be successful at the NFL level, right? That's the gist of what we're trying to get down to here. So I guess first I'll start with just an overall blanket impression. Like, first of all, like, I don't know. I think if you listen to smart people who were giving analysis throughout the draft season, right? And not just like the tired media narratives, right? If you listen to the tired media narratives, you would have this picture of JJ McCarthy as if he's like Kirk Cousins, right? Like, as if he's a game manager quarterback who was carried by the supporting cast around him, right? And wasn't asked to do anything within the offense at all. And is probably mediocre talent, like from a physical perspective, right? Like a mediocre arm, you know, not that, like he can scramble a little bit, but not that much of a runner. Basically a Brock Purdy clone, I guess potentially, right?
It's such a tell. I don't mean to interrupt you, Matt, but that's like, it's such a tell when people talk about like the weak arm. It's like you clearly you didn't watch it. I'll stop there, but like it's I always laugh. That was a funny narrative.
And even people who I have a good deal for respect for in how they watch quarterbacks. Like, I think personally we're underrating his arm talent quite a bit, just from what I heard in the status. Like, this dude, he doesn't have a Josh Allen arm, right? Like the 4 people in the NFL have a Josh Allen arm, right? He doesn't have the Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers, like, magically put the ball anywhere arm talent, right? But he's got arm strength. Like, he can rifle the ball in there. He's got velocity. He can make throws to any point in the field in any direction. And I think generally he's pretty accurate. There are some accuracy concerns I have, and I think they primarily stem from footwork, but I'm not exactly sure of that. There's also the type of throw decision making, which I do agree with as a concern. You know, a lot of people have said he only drives the ball. I think that's an issue in terms of how he's choosing his clubs. It's not that I don't think he can do it. It's just how he chooses it. But, like, he's a physically talented dude. And again, as a runner, he's not a Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray. But, like, from an athletic perspective, I bet his athletic testing would be as good as Josh Allen's. Or as good as... And he's not going to be the physical marvel that Josh Allen is, right? So he's not going to be as effective there. But frankly, I think he can be a Daniel Jones type runner. And Daniel Jones is, like, the pinnacle of somebody who basically only wins with his legs, like, as a quarterback in the NFL, right? Like, that's the only thing he's good at, but he's pretty darn good at it. So he's got Trevor Lawrence level physical tools to me, which is seems like high praise, but like I truly think he does.
Yeah, no, actually, when I was thinking about like that, first of all, that's obviously sounds insane when you say like because Trevor Lawrence was generational or whatever, and I do think he's he's kind of lived up to that generational category, but like. JJ McCarthy is extremely creative with his legs, extremely good throwing on the run, and extremely fast. Like, he's not Lamar, but he's not that far off from like that kind of like. He probably runs 4.5s, 4.6s in his 40 or something.
He doesn't have the top end like 4.4 speed, but he's got that 10-yard burst, which like people talk about with Brock Purdy, and Brock Purdy's got great 10-yard burst, and he's got the quickness too to like sidestep things and work around things.
So like my problem at how you slot him, and we can get into how you slot him into the run game. Like he's not Josh Allen because he's 6'2" and skinny. And he weighed in 215 on his pro day. But like as a player, he was listed at 200, and he looks really skinny. Yeah. I'm actually surprised you didn't hear that complaint more often, because like it's probably one of the first things you notice when you flip on his tape is like this dude's like a bit of a twig. But he's tough, so maybe that's and he has good arm talent. So I don't know why people didn't see that. Like that's a concern. So I bring that up because like you don't want to run QB power with him. Michigan did run like QB sweeps with him, or plenty of zone read and stuff. And like a lot of guys can do zone read. I shouldn't say a lot because it's the NFL. There aren't a lot of guys who are physically capable of outrunning NFL edge defenders. But McCarthy's one of them. I mean, he was doing it at Michigan. So I don't think you're wrong to say that he has Trevor Lawrence caliber physical tools. In terms of his arm strength, I would say it's above average, but there's a lot of really good arms in the NFL, too. Like not just the
Yeah.
the Josh Allen, the Justin Herberts, the Aaron Rodgers, if you count him still, the Patrick Mahomes, like the Anthony Richardson now, the Drake May now. Like I think he's below all those guys, but after that, the list gets short. Like I think his arm strength is probably, Trevor Lawrence, Derek Carr as. People talk about Derek Carr having a very strong arm. JJ McCarthy, I feel like, has a similar caliber of arm strength. I don't know where exactly you would rank him, but I feel like I could comfortably name 15 NFL starters that he's got a better arm than. So the whole arm strength thing,
including Kirk Cousins, by the way. Like Kirk has a good arm from an accuracy perspective, but JJ has a stronger arm. He's got more zip on the ball than Kirk does.
And maybe I'm overthinking here, but maybe it comes from the fact that like JJ McCarthy has he like aggressively uses his base, and I feel like you can see him really how his base drives his throws, and he actually does it really well. We talk a lot about how he needs to work on his footwork, but I feel like his footwork is like 95% of the way there, and a lot of things are like precociously good. So I feel like there are some throws, like Jordan Love's a good example, where you scout him and he has some crazy throws that are just all arm. He's not even driving his hips into it, and he can rifle it, 50 yards down the field or whatever, far hash, and it's kind of like insane bananas throws. And McCarthy doesn't necessarily do that, but he's like driving into his throws a little bit more. But when he does it, it comes out of his hand fast as like anybody throws a football. So how you talk about arm talent can depend on, well, can he make these all arm throws, or does he need to step into his base, or does he need things to be perfect? I don't think he needs things to be perfect, and I saw him change his arm angles and stuff. But when you're just talking about like where's his raw arm strength, and I feel like you should count the base too, because that's how an NFL quarterback throws the football. He's certainly above average for an NFL starter, which you can't say about more than half the guys in the NFL. So yeah, he is insanely physically talented, and he's only 21. So that potential right there off the bat is really exciting.
Yeah, for me, and it's like a ceiling question, right? Because I think what the sell was pre-draft is that JJ McCarthy doesn't necessarily have the ceiling of the guys that went in the top three, right? And I don't know if I agree with that. Like, he's not Patrick Mahomes Patrick Mahomes is a unicorn and can do whatever he wants, right? Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, if I'm just going down, like Josh Allen. Hi, everybody. Sorry for the abrupt cut there, but we got cut off on the last recording, so we're going to jump back into it here. I was talking about how, McCarthy doesn't necessarily have the level of athleticism as like, Patrick Mahomes is just a unicorn. You could argue that he's probably as athletic like that way as Patrick Mahomes, but the arm talent, the arm elasticity isn't there for McCarthy from that perspective. Josh Allen, obviously athletic freak, Lamar Jackson, athletic freak, but once you get into that next tier of guys, right, like a Joe Burrow really makes it on the mental side of his game rather than necessarily having overwhelming athleticism. Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud, Dak Prescott, I think all those guys are good athletes and have good arms, but I think JJ McCarthy's physical talents are comparable to those guys as well, right? So you look at that very, very top elite tier of quarterbacks. Maybe he doesn't have that high number one in the NFL kind of ceiling, but I think he comes very close to that. And, people argue Joe Burrow is one of the top, two quarterbacks in the NFL pretty consistently as well, just because of where he's able to be at the mental side of the game. If McCarthy is able to develop on that side and get more accurate as a passer, I think that's probably one of the biggest negatives from his overall profile. Right, and it's not like he's got bad accuracy. It's just not to the level of the elite NFL quarterbacks, in my opinion. You can see McCarthy really being that type of high-level quarterback. Like, I think the ceiling is beyond what you get from the quote-unquote Shanahan-style QBs like the Kirk Cousinses of the world.
Yeah, and this is kind of why I've said before I don't love the heuristic of, like, ceilings for quarterbacks, because, like, a weak-armed quarterback can be Tom Brady. Like we saw, Brady had like a solid arm, but like he was never like Brett Favre out there.
Peyton Manning can have one of the best quarterback seasons of all time when his arm is literally dead. Like when he has nearly lost feeling in his arm, I feel like, from that neck injury he had, right?
And like even going back to the comparisons between Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf, it was like, oh, well, Ryan Leaf has a higher ceiling. I mean, that's kind of like, it shows you how silly that conversation. But like at the same time, it is true. I think particularly as a rookie coming in, we're talking about a guy who runs like he didn't test his 40, but like probably like in the 4.5s, I want to say. Like there were examples of him on tape outrunning Blake Corum, who ran, I think, in the 4.5s, I think. So he's really, really fast. He's not like change of speed, Lamar Jackson shifty, like that kind of elite foot speed, but he does have like in a straight line, he has that initial burst. So you add that like I don't know, top 7, top 10-ish, just like foot speed with like a top 10-ish, top 15-ish arm talent for a starting quarterback in the NFL. That's a really intriguing package of physical tools. And I think that's going to really help him succeed when he starts playing early on, whether that's, for game 1 as a rookie or like back after the bye as a rookie or whenever. It's going to give him like a certain toolkit. He's not, unlike Kirk Cousins, he's going to be able to run. You're going to be able to run zone read with him. He's skinny. He's not Josh Allen in the sense of like he's just not 6'5" and 260 pounds. In fact, he weighed at 215 at his pro day and was listed at 200 at Michigan. That's one of the first things you see on tape is he's like really skinny. I'm actually surprised people don't talk about that more, that like just how skinny he looks on tape. So you're not going to like run QB power with him or like do the Jalen Hurts tush push with him as much. But you get him outside, he can outrun pro edge defenders. I mean, there were plays of him outrunning Lucas Van Ness, Packers edge, starting edge right now, on tape, sprinting out, doing the Russell Wilson thing where, he flips his back around and rolls out and buys guys downfield. So that's going to give him the ability, not just the raw talent, but he's able to use it too. He's really good at throwing on the run. So he's not just like fast for fast sake. He's able to like use it biomechanically to like make plays, keep his eyes, and throw the ball downfield. So I think all of that gives him like a really intriguing package that I think will help him have success. And also, if you buy into the intangibles and his ability to become the best version of himself, the best version of himself looks really freaking good. Like, people compare him to Kirk Cousins, but obviously with that foot speed, that athletic talent, the better arm strength than Kirk Cousins, it's something more like a faster Dak Prescott or something, or like a Daniel Jones, but like with like better mental makeup or something. Like he's a really intriguing physical package toolkit that you can buy into, and hopefully he can continue to build on it. I mean, he's a work in progress, but really intriguing. A lot of tools in his bag to work with there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you look at a guy like Brock Purdy, right? Who there's a lot of like poisoned discourse around Brock Purdy, right? Where it's like nobody, it's hard to drill down exactly who he is because of Kyle Shanahan's influence and because of his draft status and because just statistically he probably gets overrated a little bit. But Brock Purdy does have the level of athleticism where it's kind of that quick twitch athleticism. I mean, that showed up regularly in the playoff run. It's kind of because they're white guys, it's like a quote unquote sneaky athleticism, right? We have that, people have that bias still, I think. But McCarthy has similar to that level of Brock Purdy movement ability to me. He doesn't have the top end like 40-yard dash speed, but he's got that 10-yard split speed, and Brock Purdy famously has a really good 10-yard split, like matching what Lamar Jackson has. Obviously, McCarthy didn't run the 40, but McCarthy's 3-cone was phenomenal. It was under 7 seconds. Anything under 7 seconds for any position is a good 3-cone, and it was like 6.82 or something like that, I think. And that movement shows in his ability to sidestep defenders, to kind of work his way in between traffic, I think, in the run game. So that physical ability is there from the run perspective, and then I think he's got a significantly better arm than Brock Purdy. Like the criticism for me of Brock Purdy, probably the biggest criticism is arm strength in general, but particularly arm strength when on the move, right? And Purdy's a guy who likes to get out of the pocket, do that sort of work, but it kind of fell short a couple times in the playoffs, right? There was one throw across his body that he just couldn't make. I think it was in the Super Bowl, and it was just a complete dead duck. Like, J.J. McCarthy can make those throws. There are numerous examples of J.J. McCarthy with his feet not set making those throws on tape. So the arm strength to me is a lot better than that. And if you get a better version of Brock Purdy as a passer, like that turns into actually a really, really good NFL quarterback in my opinion. So I think, that kind of comparison is there. I don't want to say the sky's the limit, right? But like I don't really think he's going to be severely physically limited in the NFL in terms of his talent, and that's an important aspect. So we've just spent a ton of time, right, gushing over McCarthy from a physical perspective. Let's go into how that translates to various areas of play, right? And I think we want to start with where the dropback starts, and that would be, or where the play starts, right, with the dropback. So from a dropback perspective, I think he's got pretty good dropback footwork, It's not always consistent. He can get lazy in some cases, but from a college passer, I think it's generally pretty positive signs. Michigan asked him to do a wide variety of drops, both from under center, pistol, and from the gun. Obviously, they primarily operated out of the gun from a passing perspective, but because they're such a run-heavy offense, that under center and pistol experience is something that's positive for McCarthy. That's not necessarily true for every single quarterback that comes out of college, right? You got a lot of these spread offenses that rarely, if ever, go under center, even from the top guys that they're playing under. So his drop back depth, I thought, stayed between 8.5 and 9 yards, particularly on 3-step drops. It wasn't as clean as Kirk Cousins, who's one of the best, quarterback drop back depth players in the game. He's probably the singular best, right? So we're a little bit biased when watching him in terms of how deep he gets. So McCarthy's depth will probably put a little more strain on the tackles, but it's not bad. He really never drops back and stays at 10 yards, right? If he's going back to 10 yards, there's always a hitch up associated with it, which is one of the types of dropbacks that you have. Like on deeper developing plays, you want to drop back a little bit deeper, hitch up a couple times, and that gives you a little bit better of a launching point to step into throws. So not every drop back is the same, right? He can have 3-step dropbacks that are really quick. He can have 3-step dropbacks that are a little elongated. And when he does tend to drop back deep, I noticed it was on plays where they needed a lot of yardage, right? 2nd and 20, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 8 plus, that sort of thing. He needs to hold a little bit more and drops back a little bit deeper. It does make it more difficult for the tackles, but it gives the route more time to develop in that case. So I think it was situationally appropriate when he chose to drop back deeper, if that makes sense. So overall, I was pretty happy with him in the drop back game. I don't know if you have any thoughts on his drops specifically, Nick. I know I kind of tracked like every single one, so I've got maybe a little bit more, but we can get into
I didn't go to the insane level of detail that you did with your 30 rows, 30 columns, and 1,500 rows in your Excel spreadsheet. But I do think it's funny because you hear that's one of the most common criticisms or negatives you hear on the McCarthy scouting reports is his footwork needs to be cleaned up, which is to me that's it's not wrong, but also you could copy paste that for literally every college prospect. And then if anything, McCarthy's footwork is so much farther advanced than your typical rookie coming into the NFL because he played in a pro style under center offense, which nobody. So just being able to see him do a 7-step play action, drop back, turn around, find a guy downfield, or do the boots, be able to see the 5-step drops and be able to see him match the footwork with different concepts. Harbaugh was throwing, it truly was an NFL offense that he was running out there. So just the fact that he was able to execute that, I feel we're not talking about a Josh Allen, Jordan Love rebuilding from the ground up what the hell you're doing with your lower base.
Yeah.
We're talking about it's there, and there's a few things we have to tweak. I agree with you, especially when you look at Christian Darrisaw struggled a little bit more once Kirk Cousins went out and Josh Dobbs came in. Part of that was Kirk is so precise and consistent in his footwork mechanics, where Dobbs is totally not, and neither was Jaron Hall or anybody else. But I also think it's a matter of there's 2 things he kind of has to fix. One, his base is wider than it needs to be.
Sure.
And I'm copying a little bit off JT O'Sullivan, but he's pointed this out as well with the QB school. The other thing is he kind of has a false step in his drops, which throws off his timing, a half hitch late or something, where sometimes he'll need to hitch so that his feet are in sync. I also think sometimes, and this ties into his accuracy, his lead foot isn't always pointing to where he's trying to drive the ball. And he's a guy who's kind of reliant on he draws a lot of his power. He's not Samson with the hair, he's Samson with the quads. So he drives his base, which is a good thing. It's part of what makes him have such a strong arm. But when you're not pointing your foot in the right direction, it's going to lead to some whiffs. So they're but those are all things that, those are, I believe to be, I'm not a QB coach, but I think those are you go over it with him, you drill it so that it becomes muscle memory, and it's not a big fix. You're not reworking anything from the ground up. You're saying, hey, try this next time you go out there today. And if it clicks, it usually clicks pretty fast. So that's not to guarantee it'll get fixed right away, but these are relatively easy, quick fixes compared to some other things, learn how to throw the ball accurately. You can't really you can't really teach it. You'd have to it's like relearning your golf swing. So I think there's a lot of good. I think overall his footwork is very good for a college prospect. I think there are definite clear weaknesses that he needs to work on, and I think you should expect him to run into some issues creating more pressure. The pass protection probably will look a little bit worse if McCarthy's out there compared to what we were used to seeing with Kirk Cousins. not based on the actual talent of the front five in front of him, but just based on how much pressure he's putting on. That's also going to be the case because McCarthy's going to roll out of the pocket and be creative. So that'll be in good ways and in bad. So there are a few things to tweak on, but like I said, to me, they're like small tweaks, and the overall packages, I think his footwork is a plus.
Yeah, and I would agree with that in general. I think that the drop footwork is very good, especially for a college quarterback. The throwing mechanics footwork, right, is maybe where he needs a little bit of work. And we'll get a little bit deeper into it when we get into accuracy and throwing the ball, I think. But I think that's a good overall summary. Like, in terms of being a pocket player, though, for McCarthy, I think he's, like, excellent in terms of his reaction to pressure, his ability to sidestep rushers or create a little bit of space in the pocket, where it's getting compressed, right? Like, if an offensive lineman is getting knocked back, he can sidestep that a little bit and still make a throw. When he is in the pocket going through his reads, I think he does a pretty good job. Some people might call it a little bouncy, but I actually like it because he's consistently resetting his feet in a position to throw. To your point, there are a couple lapses with it, but I think generally it's at a pretty good level, and he's usually lined up to throw to his target that he's trying to throw to, which is very critical for quarterbacks to be able to be accurate on a consistent basis. That's something that Will Levis, like last year, had an absolutely terrible time getting through, right? Being able to do. So it's a plus for McCarthy there. And then, like, from a pressure perspective, there's a lot of talk about the Michigan offensive line being really good. They were really good from a run blocking standpoint. They were not good, in my opinion, from a pass blocking standpoint at all. So, like, I went through and charted every play, obviously. I've probably said that like 4 times. But with McCarthy, I charted every pressure. And I came up with like 105 total pressures, with McCarthy only responsible for 8 of them throughout the entire season. Which is a really low percentage. I also went into PFF's numbers. They had a few more pressures total for McCarthy, and they had 13 on him, right, which is still a really low percentage of pressures. I went and looked at all of the other guys, and McCarthy was at like 11%. Everybody else was over 15%. I think Caleb Williams was up in like the 20% in terms of the amount of pressure he allowed on himself. Right, so we're looking primarily the offensive line for Michigan was responsible, and you just watch the tape and they're really bad at pass protection. It jumped out like the first 3 plays of the Penn State game. The right tackle gets absolutely killed by Chop Robinson twice, and I think Adisa Isaac the 3rd time. But it's just like he gets beat flat out. They run straight around him. The pass protection really struggled, I think, in certain instances. They struggled protecting blitzes. And I thought McCarthy did a pretty good job pointing out blitzes generally, but sometimes guys just weren't able to pick it up on the offensive line. So even with, how bad the Michigan offensive line was, I thought he handled pressure really well because he, didn't create it for himself generally. Obviously, there are going to be certain instances where he did, but he also responded pretty well. His pressure to sack rate was fine, right? He took like 19 sacks over the course of the season. It was something like 16%. And then, just in general, like I think he has a good response to pressure. He's always keeping his eyes up downfield as he moves out of the pocket. He tries to save the pocket as much as he can. Like, he's not at the first sign of color bailing from the pocket. He really generally tries to do as much as he can against pressure to me.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because the first game I watched of his was the national championship, that Washington game, and it's funny. Those like the national championship and the Rose Bowl. His last 2 games, he did not look like a first-round quarterback. And part of the big problem, I think, in the national championship was he was kind of seeing ghosts. I think on 3 separate occasions, he kind of created his own sacks or ran into his own pressure, was bailing on clean pockets. And I was like, is this a big concern? And it's actually really funny because, like, it never happened again. So I don't really know what was happening in the national champ. But anyway, you have the actual data that, like, no, he actually is extraordinarily good against pressure, the best in the class. Keeps his eyes up, and you saw that. Like it was like actually kind of shocking watching the rest of his tape and being like, okay, it's completely different. You can tell it's a total outlier. And of course, every quarterback has bad games, or you can probably clip examples to make Patrick Mahomes look like he doesn't have a big arm. So McCarthy, he keeps his eyes up. He's resetting his feet, and it's also interesting because this also tacks on to the conversation about why did Michigan run the ball so much if McCarthy is so good. Well, it's because like the pass protection was awful, like awful. Watch some of the right tackle in particular, the left tackle was bad. the guards got drafted, but I think they're better run blockers than pass blockers. So it was just a mess. I mean, there was a lot of immediate pressure before, like McCarthy couldn't even finish his drop back before guys were in his lap, and like you can't run an offense when you can't get passes off if you're not even able to finish the drop back. So to say nothing of like getting the ball out on time, like you have to get the ball out before time. So that's part of why I think Harbaugh was so run heavy, was because he didn't have the offensive line really to do it a lot of the time, especially when you're going up against Bama. Like Bama's got some dudes. One of them is now a Viking right now.
Yeah.
You probably don't want to test that against your right tackle who can't pass protect. So that's it. That also ties together. I think the overall picture is I think his pocket presence is one of his biggest strengths, particularly. Not just in the creativity, but particularly in the ability to quickly reset and sense pressure. I think he's got really good peripheral awareness where he's able to go through his progressions while keeping track of a blindside pass rusher coming against him. He'll step up. He kind of just preternaturally senses, okay, if the left tackle's out of my vision, I should step up in the pocket. Stuff like that, which is a lot of times that's kind of a pass fail thing for me. If guys don't have that at the college level, I worry that they're ever going to learn to do that, because it's not something. It's really hard to be able to in a 2-second time frame be I'm going to go through my progressions while also keeping track of 4, 5, 6 pass rushers that are coming at me, and I can't directly look at them. I just have to sense them, for lack of a better term. So he's got that. He's got it really good, and I think it's one of the biggest strengths that we've talked about so far.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that also shows up there is he really didn't fumble over the course of the season. He only took 1 sack in the pocket where he fumbled. The other one, I think, another fumble was a sack where he kind of scrambled outside the pocket and he got hit before the line of scrimmage and just didn't do a good job protecting the ball. Those were both in the Indiana game, by the way. And then the only other fumble, he had 3 fumbles on the season, was a botched handoff on a snap where he didn't handle the snap well and it kind of got dropped. But he's not getting blindsided when he's hit as a quarterback, and he's not getting pressured a lot on his own, and he's mitigating pressure when it comes to him, right? And I think those are 3 extremely positive things you can say about McCarthy from that perspective. And then he makes the throws on the run, right? When he's scrambling, he's looking to throw. His eyes are consistently downfield. You pointed out that he's able to go through reads and make reads. He can also run scramble drill and make plays there. If I had one criticism of him on those, it's that, sometimes he holds on to it a little bit too long, right? And tries a little bit too hard. He only had, I charted 2, PFF charted him only as 1 throwaway throughout the course of the season. And there are a couple interceptable passes. I don't remember if any of them were actually intercepted, but on the sideline, that the Alabama game was one where the defensive back caught it, but he just was so close to the sideline that it ended up being out of bounds. There was another one earlier in the season where I think it actually did turn into an interception, or it was an interceptable pass. Maybe it was Bowling Green or UNLV, where he just held on to the ball for too long. The Bowling Green game obviously was rough. The Maryland game was rough from an interception perspective. We'll probably get to that from a decision-making perspective in a little bit here. But, he could use throwing the ball away more, I think, is one thing. Otherwise, though, I don't really fault many of his decisions. He did a great job converting plays, even plays where I thought maybe he missed a read down the field, right, and turned down a pass. He was able to scramble and make something out of it. There was a big play in the Michigan State game when it was 3rd down. He had an open tight end on a curl route, and he chose not to throw that. It was 3rd and 13. Curl route may or may not have converted. It was 4 yards short of the sticks, right? So it probably doesn't convert. He's able to scramble, find a tight end, back kind of over the middle of the field, and make a completion for a 1st down. I think that's a real positive. I know I did watch JT O'Sullivan, who does phenomenal work, by the way. Absolutely go seek out his content. But I watched, that was in the Michigan State game. I watched JT, and I don't think JT realized that it was 3rd and 13, right, when he was talking about the turn down and that curl route, because it was a turn down in the curl route. But again, he's trying to convert the 1st down. I think I like that mentality there.
Yeah, I think the most important takeaway is that he has the ability to throw really well on the run, and he's able to create out of structure when he does it. I think you're right. The fact that he's only thrown the ball away once or twice all of last year is kind of insane. And he tries to get away with things that he's going to have to learn, especially at the NFL level. No, you can't do that. And part of that is it's not directly translatable because as soon as you flip the switch to where it's a scramble drill, we're playing backyard football, just throw to where the guys, just throw to open grass or whatever. Defenders are also going to go to open grass too, and so that you're prone to it's a high risk, high reward situation. And Justin Jefferson is going to play those differently than whoever on the Michigan.
So, what Johnson? What's his name? And so Morgan and those guys, like anybody but Roman Wilson and the tight ends in this passing offense, I don't think is really a complete receiver. Cornelius Johnson made some nice catches, and he's had some absolutely boneheaded plays. Like, I think he's a physically talented guy, but I don't think it's all there as a receiver yet.
But also, even if it were like stacked receivers, like it's going to be different, and part of it is just chemistry and how you guys want to play those scramble drills, and can you try and throw it low and away versus out of bounds versus over the top of a cloud corner or whatever. So it's like a thing that did not go right, but just because it didn't go right at Michigan doesn't mean it's not going to go right for the Vikings. So I'm very encouraged by the fact that he's very good throwing on the run, both to his right and to his left. Which not every quarterback can do, and he throws with a lot of accuracy, and he's able to see the field while rolling away from pressure, and he has the athleticism to be able to outrun NFL caliber edge defenders, which a lot of quarterbacks cannot outrun a Danielle Hunter, but McCarthy's the kind of guy who can. So I like the toolkit. It might be there might be some lowlights and highlights as a rookie, but I like the toolkit.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, if you want one play to show you like who JJ McCarthy can be as a quarterback, I think it's in the Alabama game. It's the play where they're running a trick play, right? And they've got a throwback to JJ McCarthy. So he like pitches it, and then the running back throws the ball back to him. First of all, the throw's high. He has to adjust over his head to catch it. Second of all, and the biggest thing, is Dallas Turner is bearing down on him. Dallas Turner read the play pretty good, and he's sprinting right at him. So McCarthy has to be off balance, jump a little bit to catch the ball, catch it, come down with it, turn around, find an open receiver, and Roman Wilson was wide open. But find it and then fire the ball like pretty much immediately as he's falling off his back foot. The ball travels about 30 yards in the air. It was pretty straight on, so it wasn't the deepest throw in the world. But to be able to do that with a massive defender in your face while having just adjusted to catch the pass, and it was pinpoint accurate. Like, it was dead on for what Roman Wilson needed, even if he was wide open. It was just one of the most impressive plays I saw from McCarthy, right? So, like, there's the high-level athleticism, off-script kind of plays that I think you really like to see from any quarterback, really.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things you can pull out of that play. I think the funniest one to me, though, is because you hear so much about, like, oh, well, he's not a high-end arm talent. Like, dude, he had zero base. His legs were being taken out from under him, and he's throwing the ball 30 yards downfield while, like, sideways or whatever. Like, being tackled to the ground. He did not step into this throw. He had a guy taking out his legs from under him. So, like, all the talk about, does he over-rely on his base? Or, he's got a just barely good enough arm. Like, no, watch his tape. Like, watch this one play, and it destroys all those narratives. So, that was a really fun play.
If you see the misses, I think there may be a systemic footwork thing with those misses, but it's not he doesn't have the arm talent to do it with his base. It's his base is leading him in the wrong direction, right? Like, I didn't think I had an issue with a off-balance throw that really was, like, egregiously bad, right? Like, or, I guess every guy has a couple of those, right? Like, Patrick Mahomes had a terrible game in the Super Bowl against the Bucs when he was under pressure all day, right? Like, nobody's going to be perfect. But I think McCarthy is really good, on the move, under pressure, in all those sort of circumstances. So why don't we move on to kind of the decision-making portion of the game, right? Which I think is a little bit interesting for McCarthy. I mentioned the lack of throwaways. That would be one concern for me, is if he gets a little bit force-happy in the NFL, right? Obviously, in college, they faced some very difficult defenses, right? They had the Ohio State defense. They had the Alabama defense that they played against. Penn State's defense overall was pretty good, especially for a college football defense. Iowa's defense was a great college football defense. It carried them to their conference championship game, right? Despite having, like, the worst offense in the entire country. So, he's playing some pretty difficult opponents among that, but there's obviously the weaker ones. So he ends up with a bunch of open receivers. I thought he did a very good job quickly and efficiently progressing through reads, especially when it pressure bearing down on him. To your point earlier, there were like multiple plays where he was able to get through 3 reads within one step, go left, right, center. And granted, it's a quick game. You're supposed to, like a spacing concept, you're supposed to be able to read that out pretty quickly. But he's able to do that. We see that. He's able to progress beyond his first read. In the charting I did, there were about 300 plays that he had, or exactly 300 plays he had that I said were true read plays, right? Like, so your design screen, that's not really a read, right? Your gadget plays, like your tap passes or a triple option play, he had a couple triple option pop passes, which were pretty nice, but they're not really reads. RPOs are one read, right? A run pass read, but you know where you're throwing the ball immediately. So on plays where he truly had to drop back and read, there were 300 of them. About 160, I think I had 100 and... sorry, let me pull up my numbers here. I lost them. My bad. So 182 were on his first read, which is pretty typical. Like, especially on quick dropbacks, you're going to have one read and you're going to throw the ball, right? You're going to have a pre-snap read basically determine where you want to throw the ball, right? Or on a smash concept, it's a high-low, right? So you're reading the corner and whether he goes deep or short, but really, if you throw high-low, it's your first read, right? So a lot of plays are going to be on the first read. But, beyond that, 63 plays on a second read and 55 plays beyond the second read. So he is regularly progressing beyond that first read. There are examples of full field progressions. It's not just a one side of the field read on the offense. There were, 10 or 12 backside digs that he's throwing, right, which is a super popular play in the NFL right now, and it's super popular in the Vikings offense to be able to hit that behind the front side concept. So I was really happy with what I saw as a decision maker from J.J. McCarthy. He's not putting the ball in harm's way regularly. I do have that negative when he was doing it on the move, but I think in the pocket, on script, really, I have very few, if any, of his interceptions were his fault.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good to point out here, and this is one of the areas in which, going into the draft, I was kind of buying into like the Drake May hype because it would be fun to get a guy who was like a generational talent, but I personally had May and McCarthy on about the same tier. This was a big reason why, is I feel like he's able to execute. I also think this is why the Shanahan guys all apparently loved him, is like he's just really good at executing the play and doing the underrated things that go unnoticed, like the full field reads. There aren't a lot of college quarterbacks who are being asked to do full field reads and get the ball out on time in rhythm. McCarthy was one of them, and he just does an exceptional job with it. It wasn't always perfect. I'm not saying he's going to get out there and be Peyton Manning from year one or whatever. At least veteran Peyton Manning, rookie Peyton Manning had some learning curves too. But he's able to get through. He'll do the stick, middle sit route, no. Okay, I'm going to hit the backside dig or the backside curl, and he was doing that across the entire field, and that was like just. It's like watching a pro quarterback. I'm not used to seeing college quarterbacks do that out there. And so that was just like really impressive. I also thought good aggression. He's not, deep ball hunting, but he will rifle it into very, very small windows. That's almost a negative because
particularly over the middle of the field, he hunts small windows. And his understanding of the leverage though, I think is really good, but keep going.
Yeah, no, it's like he'll throw some balls that are like, how did you know you were gonna be able to get that past the linebacker? Because if this was like a dart, but if it were like a foot off, that could be an interception. So
oh my God, that one Ohio State touchdown, right? Where it's literally, he knows that the defender's going to robot, right? He's going to turn and his back's going to be him. So he pins it right on the receiver, right inside the defender. It's an incredible throw. I think it is a repeatable throw for the NFL level, to be honest with you. But if the defender were playing it differently, and I guess he guessed wrong about how the defender were playing it, it was easily a pick. So it is one of those things.
And the other thing, and this dovetails also into the timing, but he just precocious is the word I keep coming back to him with him, is because I'm just not used to seeing college quarterbacks one hitch, boom, I'm on my third read and I'm getting the ball out. That's just pretty unusual. You see a lot of the cool, the Caleb Willie, or the highlights of guys scrambling 4 seconds after the pass, and they throw this 60-yard touchdown after guys breaking 2 tackles. That's all really impressive, but to me that's not repeatable. That's not going to happen at the NFL level, because that's just not how. In the NFL, you got to get the ball out in under 2.5 seconds, or else you're up against NFL caliber edge defenders, defensive linemen who are going to destroy you. And that's just, you want to build a predictive model of like what your quarterback can do. Look at what they can do in the first 2.5, 3 seconds. And for JJ McCarthy, which isn't to say he was perfect. I mean, there are examples of him locking into his first read. There are examples of him being late to work across a full field read. So I'm not saying he's going to be perfect. And I think there are going to be some growing pains here. But for a college quarterback to come out and be able to say, hey, I can consistently read stick and work to my backside dig or whatever on a full field read and do it in rhythm. There's just so many snaps of him like throwing the ball, getting the ball out in rhythm with like no hitch, one hitch, two hitches on a full field read. And that's just, you don't usually see that in college quarterbacks. So that's really, really encouraging. It's not like Kirk Cousins level, so you can't expect that from a rookie, but like the fact that he can already do it at 21 years old, pretty unheard about. And I think that's part of what makes me so excited to see him in the Kevin O'Connell offense, because that's like, you take that talent, the ability, like the rhythm and timing and decisiveness and the ability to see the field and make the reads, and you put that in a guy who can scheme up a really good offense, and we know Kevin O'Connell can. That's what makes me really excited about him. So that's another area. I'm also trying to point out the things that I'm worrying about here, but like these areas in particular, I think this is if it works out, I think we're going to be able to point to his ability to just get the ball out with rhythm on timing, and that's part of what makes me bullish on him starting sooner than later. Is like he just does the things that you really want an NFL quarterback to be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely, and I generally agree with it. To go a little bit into the concern, one of the concerns I have is there are a handful, maybe up to like 10 or 15, what I would call turn downs on tape, right, where he has available options or he's missing the best option. Yeah. I think there was a deep post where he threw a pick where it was double post. So there was an inside post and an outside post, and he throws the outside post. Theoretically, the receiver just loses the route, right? And you want to throw it up and give your guy a chance to win the ball, and the corner makes an interception. I think it was in the Bowling Green game. But the first post, based on the leverage of the safety, like was more open and had a better opportunity, I think, if he threw it. And, he's looking at that. I think he should throw it. I mentioned the Michigan State game where he saw an open receiver. There were a couple other plays where he had open receivers and chose not to throw to them. I don't know if that was like like early in the Alabama game, I think he was flustered a little bit, right? He struggled. Like that was the one time I would say he was flustered throughout the entire course of the entire season, right? But, so it could just be a mental thing where he's maybe trying to do a little bit too much. I would like to see that go away, but in general, I think his timing is really good, right? Like it's kind of hard to quantify because I don't have, even though I did all this work on him, I don't have the reference of what other quarterbacks look like or even what NFL quarterbacks look like, right? Because I haven't taken the time to sit down and grade every single throw for them like I have for McCarthy. So I guarantee you're going to see these across tape of other players. It's just notable when it happens, and it's, I'd be interested to see how it bears out. Like, I think he has really good field vision and can see the field really well, but maybe it's an illusion and he's guessing. Like on the fringe case where he looks completely out of place in the NFL, which I don't think is going to happen to him, right? I think, but on the fringe case where he does that, those turn downs might be instructive for what the issue was, right? If that makes sense. If I go to interceptions a little bit, like I didn't think he really made very many bad decisions at all, though. In general, like I don't think he regularly threw the ball into locations where he couldn't make the throw that he was trying to make, right? There's not a ton of PBUs. I noted them all down. I don't have the number counted up right now, but only 9 interceptable passes, and really over the course of 300 something passes, and really a couple of those I quibble with where it's like, okay, I see what the idea is here, and he just didn't execute the throw as well as he could have, as opposed to it being a, decision that was bad, where he was throwing into a window that he shouldn't. And like I said earlier, most of the decisions that were bad, I would say, were more either giving his receiver a chance to win the ball or trying to do a little bit too much on a play instead of throwing it out of bounds, throwing it away. So it doesn't really feel all that bad to me, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And I think you're right. A lot of the interceptions come from hero ball, just throw the ball away, dude. There are a couple examples I can think, like in the first series of the Rose Bowl, he throws it to a defender like on the first play and then the third play, which was a really rough start. And I think on the third one, he just missed the defender. It was like he was throwing it to like the apex or whatever, and I think he just didn't see that there was a defender. That like one of those brain fart moments where you're like, "Oops,"
Yeah.
like you pressed the wrong button in Madden. And then in Bowling Green, there was the one I think it was a trap coverage, and he just threw the ball late, and the corner was able to make a play on it. And I don't know if he missed or he was just throwing it late, and he should have like just dirted it or something.
Yeah. The
So they're
corner
like
kind of fell underneath it. Yeah.
so there are examples of like mistakes, and I think especially at the NFL level when the talent level is a lot higher and the speed of the game is faster because everybody's an elite athlete compared to college where only like two guys are maybe elite athletes from game to game or whatever. um, I think there will be some growing pains, and he will, every rookie throws interceptions as they adjust to how the game is played. So that's an area for concern, but also I feel like these are kind of like the exceptions that prove the rule. When you watch McCarthy's tape, the consistency and the timing and the ability to get the ball out on time is what really sticks out to you. Not and like when these ugly interceptions happen, they stick out because it's like, oh man, I just watched like 50 third down conversions, and now all of a sudden you're throwing it to a Bama defender you didn't see. So it's again, I think there will be growing pains there, but I'm also not concerned about it long term because I think that's true of pretty much every college quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. One last thing there, and this will dovetail into our next conversation, which is about accuracy, right? I think that from an accuracy perspective, he's very good. One question I have is, he needs to layer the ball more often than he does. I don't think it's he can't layer the ball, and this is a common criticism. I've heard it all over the place that, he kind of only has one speed, right, where he's only throwing line drives or he's only throwing kind of those flamethrowers to the middle of the field, and he doesn't have touch passes in his game. I do think there are touch passes in there, particularly on plays where receivers are wide open. I think he puts a little bit of touch on it. To be honest with you, like he throws an easily catchable ball to the wide open receivers to me. But and there are plays where he's layering balls over linebackers over the middle of the field to a route that's to a crossing route across the field. Those are touch passes. Those require touch because you got to get it up over the linebacker and down beneath the safety over top to be able to hit that. So I think those examples are on tape, but like when you look at those interceptions and you look at some of the misses and some of the passes broken up, there are plays where he needs to put more arc on the ball, particularly going to the back of the end zone. The Maryland interception that he had was to a linebacker that was underneath. A tight end would have been open in the back of the end zone. They say you should throw the ball high back five, right, when you're throwing to the back five of the end zone. That means your receiver should have to jump up basically to catch the pass, and nobody before him should be able to make a play on it. So the arc was a little bit low. There was another one where he was in the Maryland game as well, where it was an interceptable pass. PFF charted that way. Initially, I didn't have it, but I was looking back at the PFF numbers trying to find it, and I agree it is interceptable. It's tipped directly up. The linebacker has to jump, and he tips it directly up in the air. He doesn't really have a chance to catch it, but if the ball's a little bit higher, it clears the linebacker, and the tight end has a chance to jump up and catch the ball, right? I thought there were another couple examples of that type of throw within his game where it's getting batted down before the receiver has a chance to get the ball by an underneath player. So I would like to see him, improve that as he gets to the NFL level.
Yeah, and I think this is probably the biggest concern I have with him. Like, there are other things where I'm like, yeah, there are growing pains. This to me is like, well, this could be a bigger problem than just growing pains here, because I think it's not that he can't throw, outside sideline fades or whatever. There are examples of him throwing it accurately, but there aren't a lot. I mean, you're already dealing with a small sample size, and we have examples of misses. The guy, whether he's overthrowing it or he's just not on the same page. You want some things that I think kind of assuage my concerns a little bit are that I don't think some of these misses I think are on receiver error. Like there were sideline fades that were the receiver inexplicably slows down or whatever, and it would have been to a better receiver who did a better job tracking the ball or keeping pace with the ball, or in the hand fighting as he's establishing leverage over the top of the route, it would have been like a deep touchdown, and we'd be praising J.J. McCarthy's deep ball. But because the receivers at Michigan, other than Roman Wilson, were not, nothing to write home about. It's it's the same thing with that Bowling Green interception on the post. Like the wide receiver, like it was not maybe the best choice, but it could have been a deep touchdown if the wide receiver made a good play, and instead he let the cornerback undercut him. So I think there's potential that, like, with throwing to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and hopefully T.J. Hawkinson before too long, it's going to be a little bit of a different story because all those guys are really good at establishing leverage and tracking the ball deep, and they're all good deep ball receivers. Well, maybe not Hawkinson, but Addison especially and Jefferson especially, good deep ball receivers. So maybe that helps. But I also think, like, there's some truth to the fact that, like, he's a little over reliant on his driver, and he needs to work a little bit more on his, I'm not a golfer, but what is it, his 4-iron or whatever. So, or like a baseball, he's got like a 60 fastball, but he's got like a 40 changeup. He kind of needs to. I need to see more on his ability to. Can he do the Russell Wilson sideline moonball? Can he do the? Because we've seen a lot of, like, He'll put a lot of mustard on that seam pass over the field, but can you layer it over the top of the defender so that it's coming on from a downward angle, so it's easier to like drop it in the bucket? You don't see many examples of that on tape. It's not that he can't do it, because there are some examples, but you really don't see enough to make you comfortable. And that, I don't know, is something, if that's not, to me, not something that's easily learned, like it's you don't easily learn to throw the ball at a completely new trajectory, and the timing and the chemistry of that with the receiver. So to me, that is a concern. I do think he's going to struggle to hit, sideline fades as a rookie or whatever. That's not to say he'll never develop it. He could. I mean, he might already be doing it. Like, one of the benefits of having a small sample size is maybe he can do it, and by the fact that we didn't see him do it a lot, but maybe he did it in practice, he can do it. But to me, that's one of the biggest question marks on the resume is, can he just throw like the backside dig at 99 miles per hour, or is he capable of throwing the moonshots and the over the shoulder stuff too? So we'll see. Yeah, so that's to me, that it's all, not to monologue too long, but like his accuracy is good, but also this is like one aspect of accuracy that he's going to throw inaccurate passes on. It's not because he's not an accurate passer. It's because there are, golf clubs that he hasn't shown the ability to use well and regularly yet.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think that he does have the ability to drop the ball in the bucket on the sideline. Just from my take, and there's one play against Bowling Green where obviously it was like his worst game of the season statistically, threw 3 picks. But it's a deep ball on the sideline, to his left, and he drops it absolutely beautifully in the bucket, in my opinion. And the receiver just didn't adjust well to the ball, and he only gets one hand on it. Like, it doesn't look like a catch at all. But if you watch it from both angles, and I posted it to Twitter as a Twitter poll and asked people, do you think this throw is accurate, right? Because that's really what you're trying to do when you're charting everything, is try to... It's actually not all that easy, because there are so many plays where it's like, all right, was the receiver supposed to do this instead? Are they just not on the same page, right? So it's kind of difficult, or, it's kind of difficult, right, to actually chart and be consistent. And if you look at PFF's numbers, they don't have this throw against Bowling Green as accurate. Like, he only has one deep left throw in that game, and he's 0 for 1 in terms of their accuracy percentage, right? I charted it as accurate because I think with a better adjustment by a receiver, that's a touchdown, and it's pretty obviously a touchdown.
It was definitely catchable.
It's definitely catchable, and I think it's not only catchable, it's exactly where it should be, right? Because it leads the receiver away from the defender. The receiver just doesn't do a good enough job adjusting the football and finding it in the air, to me. There was another play where he had a beautiful deep ball. It was a completion. It was in the stride to Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards, who is a running back, right, lined up on a linebacker, doesn't adjust perfectly to the ball and ends up stepping out of the 1-yard line instead of it being a touchdown, right? Like, if it's a wide receiver, that's a touchdown because he understands how to read the ball and understands how to track on the sideline and stay in bounds, right, as he's running and catching a football. It's just something that they train out a little bit better than running backs do. But even with those items, right, and those are 2 deep left throws I mentioned, he really struggled from a perspective being pinpoint both deep and to the left. So I did it compared to Ben Solak at the Ringers charting. He as part of the Ringers, they have like a draft guide on their website. He charted, and I don't know if he did every single throw from each of the quarterbacks, but he at least did a very significant sample of all the throws from the quarterbacks, right? And he charted that. So I compared my charting numbers to his. I was a little bit more harsh, actually, on McCarthy on the deep throws, and probably a little bit more lenient on the intermediate and short throws and throws behind the line of scrimmage. So I don't know if we have a different sample. Obviously, nobody's going to be one-to-one when charting this, because there is actually, I think, a decent deal of subjectivity that goes into what is a pinpoint throw or what isn't a pinpoint throw, even if it sounds like it should be very cut and dry. However, McCarthy lags behind everybody deep and to the left, I think, generally. And to the left is an interesting point, right? Because I think there's part of it that's footwork based. You look and I think he overstrides. Like, he opens his hips too much and his foot's basically pointing towards the sideline. There is one throw that's more over the middle of the field, but it is to his left against Michigan State, where it's very obvious that his front foot, you want your front foot, when it lands, pointed directly at the receiver, at your target where you're trying to throw to. Your base can be a little bit open, right, in your stance, where your front, it's not necessarily a line between your back foot and your front foot towards the target, but you want your back heel to be aligned with your front foot pointing directly at the target, essentially. Is kind of how you want to throw, just to get the maximum velocity as you bring your hips through the throw from a mechanical perspective. And he opens too wide to the left, and sometimes that front foot is off. That's where the footwork consistency comes in. Like, he needs to get better at repeatably drilling that. There's also a thing to the left, though, where I'm not sure these receivers are running the routes at the correct depth all the time. There's a play in the Ohio State game where the receiver's at 7 yards, he throws the ball, it hits the ground at 6 yards. If you look at, like, I've got the Kyle Shanahan playbook, it's got route trees and that sort of thing. There's not a 7-yard out. There's a 6-yard out route, right? It's called your stick route. So is the receiver just too deep? Is the receiver just drifting too much? There was a 14-yard route that Roman Wilson ran where it really looks like he's drifting as he cuts that route, right? Like, he makes his cut, he falls a couple yards back, the ball ends up short in front of him, it's not catchable. But is that J.J. McCarthy's fault, or is that Roman Wilson's fault for not running the right route? And there's not really a good way for us to determine that, right, from outside of the building, who's right and who's wrong. I ended up charting those plays as inaccurate and plays like that as inaccurate, unless I thought it was like really, really, really obvious that the receiver messed up, which is not in pretty much any case. But yeah, so he falls behind going to the left. If you look at it, in the intermediate left, he was 5 of 11, or 5 of 15, 33%. Deep left, he was actually a little bit better, I thought, 6 of 14. But short left, he was 21 of 39, only 54% in terms of pinpoint accuracy. That's what you want to see from a quarterback. But you flip it over to the right side of the field, he was 10 of 14 going right in the intermediate, that's 71%, 33 of 57 intermediate, which is, by the way, 10 to 20 range, that's almost 58%. Those are good, very good numbers for what Ben Solak had. And then also, if you look at just accurate, right, I bucketed it into pinpoint, catchable. So pinpoint and catchable are quote-unquote accurate throws, and then inaccurate is the last category, obviously. If you look at his just accuracy charts, they look even way better. And I compare those to NFL direction from the PFF data of their accuracy percentage, right? So I have a little bit of different of a standard than PFF does, but if you look at just the accurate throws, he actually looks fine. He looks okay to the left. He doesn't look as good to the left as he does to the right, but he's green in 10 of the 12 categories, right? And green is any shade of green is above average. The darker it gets, it'll be I'm just looking at my data in front of here. The darker it gets is more accurate. The intermediate throws to the middle and to the right are some of his most accurate situations, and I think that's what he's going to be doing a lot for the Vikings. So from an accuracy perspective, I agree he needs to work on big things, and that could be a ceiling limiter for me, but I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker for him as an NFL player.
Yeah, it's really interesting talking about accuracy, arm talent, timing, decisiveness, rhythm, because it all kind of like overlaps a little bit, and there are elements to his accuracy that are consistently good to excellent. And I think his ball placement on backside digs or his ball placement on seams, his ball placement and his timing on those stick routes, generally very, very good. They're the throws on the fades that I'm not sure if it's a consistency thing, receiver error thing, or if he just isn't quite as good at those throws that are not as good. And so how do you summarize all of that to like one accuracy grading? Like, because they're it's like a report card where he's got some A's and some like B minuses or whatever. So I don't know how you average that out. Overall, I tend to think of him as an accurate quarterback with the potential to be good to great on the accuracy scale. But we're going to have to see, and it's gonna translate completely differently with completely new receivers. The one benefit is like, regardless of how much blame you want to throw on the Michigan receivers, throwing to Jefferson and Addison is going to give him a much
he's got a little bit better of receiving options on the Minnesota Vikings.
But that's the whole logic of drafting a quarterback is like they built the entire ship around him already, and now they just need a guy in the captain's seat to pilot it. So he's kind of got as good of a rookie situation to fall into as possible between the bookend tackles and the Pro Bowl wide receivers he's throwing to. So and the I should say Pro Bowl receivers generally, because there's like 3 of them. Addison, I would say, is Pro Bowl caliber. He's not Pro Bowl yet, but like Jefferson, obviously, Hawkinson is a Pro Bowler, and Addison similar caliber receiver. So that will go a long way to helping him, and they're going to make him look better than he is because of how good of receivers they are.
Yeah, one thing I actually struggled a little bit with, and I want to get your opinion on it here, is there were a handful of throws, particularly on crossing routes over the middle of the field, where it was just like a half step behind for me. It wasn't necessarily behind the receiver, but it was kind of on their hip, right as they're running across the field, as opposed to maybe a half step ahead of them where they have to reach out. I thought it let defenders back in the play on a couple of situations where there was tighter coverage. I don't know if you got a feel for that in terms of like I don't know if it's an accuracy thing or maybe it was a little bit late on timing thing with those throws. Did you see that as well, or what's your take on that?
I thought he was good on crosses. You watched more tape than I did. So like the 7 game, like in the national championship, I thought, he had good timing on his crosses.
And I don't think it was like bad timing necessarily. It was just like, I wasn't sure, and I think I charted a lot of them as pinpoint, but I wasn't sure whether it was truly pinpoint or like maybe just slightly behind.
And this could get into like the false step he kind of has in his footwork sometimes, where like he's not always throwing on time. Sometimes he's a little bit late, and that especially on a very timing dependent route like a crosser where you have to get it exactly where they're going as they're running across the field. You want to hit them between the numbers or lead them a little bit. And he's throwing. I remember examples of him throwing behind, but the examples I remember were caused by pressure or something, not because he had a clean pocket and he was just off with his throw. So that could be a footwork thing, or it could just be you watched more snaps than I did and saw things that I didn't. So, but I did not flag that as like a concern.
And by the way, it's not just he's throwing accurate because it's all short throws or all stuff that's like in the middle of the field. Obviously, I talked about accuracy to the different levels, but like one of the things to note with college quarterbacks is the ability to throw to the field, right? When you're on the hash, the wide side of the field is called the field, and the short side of the field is called the boundary, right? Just to be very clear with what I'm talking about. In college, the hashes are wider than they are in the NFL. It's actually like about 3 extra yards to throw all the way to the sideline to the field, and in between the numbers and the sideline, which is where a lot of offensive operate, the NFL is something like 18 to 30 yards horizontal. College, because the numbers are wider too, when you're throwing in between the numbers and the sideline, it's more like 27 to 33 yards, right? So every throw between the numbers and the sideline in the college game to the field is like an NFL throw. McCarthy had almost 40 throws to the field in between the numbers and the sideline. It was like 36 or 37. I don't have that number quite up, but I just looked it up. And that's like over 10% of his passing attempts, right? So he's regularly accessing that portion of the field. It's not something he's scared to attack, and I think that's a positive thing overall because like a lot of college quarterbacks, right, when we're looking at passing data left or right, if you're on the right hash, you're only throwing like 12 yards to get to the wide side. I'm sorry, you're throwing 20 yards to get to the wide side of the field. But the other side, that's 13 more yards. That's almost 1.5. That's more than 1.5 times as far, right? So there's a huge difference between throwing to the boundary and to the field, and I think McCarthy accesses the field very well. He's got the arm strength to be able to do that, and accuracy on those throws. It falls off a little bit when he's going to the left, but I don't think it's an issue going to the right, and that's a good thing for me. So why don't we flip it over, unless you've got anything else on accuracy, Nick, to who he is as a runner with the football in his hands?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because at 200 pounds, but like with a 4.5s 40 or whatever, what do you do with that?
Yeah,
like obviously you can.
So real quick, he was played at 200 pounds. He looks skinny on tape. College guys can play skinnier. Everything I heard about him at the combine was like it looked like he put on true weight to get to that 215 range, rather than like water weight. I don't know. Like when guys like Kyler Murray got to 200 pounds or whatever, but didn't do any of the drills and dropped it immediately, probably for their pro day. It's a little bit different than me to like everybody who talked about JJ McCarthy sounds like he really put on that weight and he might be able to sustain the weight. And as a younger player, I think there's some probably validity to that, right, where he's a little bit skinny in his frame. So if he's able to put on the weight and maintain the athleticism, which he ran that great 3-cone at that weight at the combine, right? So I'm not worried about the change of direction, which I think you would lose the most when putting on extra muscle. I think is a pretty good sign. But I agree with you; he's a little bit skinny as a runner.
Oh, my thought is he's not a Lamar, and I mean that both in terms of he's not running a sub 4.40. And in terms of Lamar has a unique shiftiness that, like just an elite ball carrier. If he were a receiver, he would be, in the Deebo Samuel tier of guys who can just elite at making guys miss and picking up yards after the catch, or in his case, yards, in the open field. So despite, I would say, top 5-ish, top 10-ish athleticism as a pure runner, or just in terms of pure speed, I shouldn't say as a runner because there's a lot more that goes into being a good runner than just speed. But in terms of pure speed, he's got some really good tools there. But he's kind of like a one-cut runner. So he's not somebody who I think it's interesting because like you look at that 3-cone and you think maybe he would be, but I see him more as like a one-cut-and-go kind of guy if you want to use him as a runner. So I think obviously sprinkle in a heavy dose of the zone read because I think he can be really good at it. He showed the ability to consistently make the right reads at Michigan when they did zone read. I do think you can build in a little bit more. You can do the QB draws. You can probably do some QB sweeps. I don't want to do the job. I mean, I mentioned it. I don't want to run him between the tackles. I don't want to do the tush-push things with him just because I think, maybe if he's 21, so it's possible he bulks up a little bit more just because of how young he is, that his body might still be growing. So if he develops into a bigger quarterback, kind of weird to think about. Like he's not going to grow 2 inches, but like if he develops into a bigger quarterback, maybe that option is there. But I think for now, you do the zone read plus stuff. Like in some of the design QB run, you go 5 wide and then you run it with you do the QB draw or whatever. I would see some of that, but because of his, I don't see him like you're not pulling out the Cam Newton, Josh Allen. You're not, or even the Kyler Murray stuff. You're not. I wouldn't do that with him. But some of the more. The Jalen Hurts tier, or maybe not even Jalen Hurts, but like the Dak Prescott tier, where like I think he's going to get a lot of rushing yards, and I think he's going to be doing it on dropback plays, and I think you can build in the zone reads. I'm interested to see how you would use him as a runner because he's kind of a unique, physical tool set combined with his weight and his skinniness. I'm wondering how you think best way to use that.
Yeah, I think you definitely want him on the outside more than between the tackles just because of the size and because of the wear and tear on quarterbacks. Like, maybe in the playoffs you can run, like, GT counter option and stuff like that, right, which is, like, the Ravens staple, or, like, the Bills love running that with Josh Allen. And there were, Michigan ran 3 reps of GT counter option, but the primary mode was read option. Right? And I think read option's still a very valid response, especially when people are overreacting to certain things in the run game on defense. And he handles that very well, right? He first of all, he makes the correct read on a consistent basis. Like, I don't know if I kind of like maybe one missed read out of 20 plus, run plays that he had kind of an option on. That he kept the ball, right? I wasn't, to be honest, as diligent when it was read option and he was handing the ball off. But I'd rather guys hand the ball off if there's a question, right, than kind of keep it. So not incorrectly keeping the ball is a big win for me. But, he's got the quickness to beat defensive backs on the edge and kind of get out of bounds. And he's got the mental awareness to avoid hits, get down when he scrambles, to kind of avoid the big hits or get out of bounds once he's reached the marker, right? He's not running out of bounds, a yard short or going down a yard short of the first down. He's getting his goal, or at least as much of his goal as he can. And he does seem to have the ability to situationally turn it on, right? Like in third down, he'll fight for extra yardage to try to get the first down marker. Late in the game, if they were struggling, like in the Alabama game, I mean, they weren't really down. Right, so it's kind of hard to say, oh, does he really turn it on? But I thought there were a couple notable examples, where it was a critical situation and he was able to get the yardage he needed through contact to do that. But he generally tries to avoid that. They ran a couple. I think the Vikings will do a good job, and I hope they mix it in and do a good job of surprising people, because I think that's something Michigan did well. There was like a 3rd and 10 where they converted on a QB sweep because they just absolutely surprised the defense, or setting up that 4th and short by surprising the defense with the quarterback run, going and converting the 4th down. Like, they were very, very consistent in if they set up a 4th and short, actually converting it. And I think McCarthy's like a big benefit there. What I mean is, I think he's a big part of the reason they were able to do that, right? And often it was like a quick passing play on 4th down where he processes it quickly, got the correct pre-snap read, and just made the play efficiently, right? So that was a really big positive for me on McCarthy. As a scrambler, I thought he was very good. So he had 47. And this includes a couple plays that I think got called back due to penalty, but he had 47 true rushing attempts. 27 were design plays and 20 were scrambles. He averaged 9 yards per attempt on the scramble, right? Like, he's got that burst and that speed once he breaks the pocket. He had like a 20-something yard rushing touchdown. He might have had another one that was in that 20-yard range as a rushing touchdown. In the national championship game against Washington on 3rd down, he had a great scramble where he made a guy miss really in space at the linebacker level, burst past, the defensive tackles to get through the line, and then got down after like 10 or 20 yards, and it was the 3rd and long, so he converts the first down, just kind of makes a critical play in the moment. So he does that with his legs. But again, we go back to what we talked about, quite a while ago at this point. He doesn't run when he doesn't have to, right? Like, Jaden Daniels was a huge eyedropper and really never looked to throw after his first read was closed. And maybe that was the design of the LSU offense, right? But McCarthy absolutely looks to throw, and he tries to draw it out as long as possible when he breaks the pocket, right? So I think the combination is very impressive, because he averaged like 7.8 yards per attempt. So 7.1 yards per attempt on designed runs, 9.0 yards per attempt on scrambles, 7.8 overall yards per attempt for McCarthy, which is really impressive. At the NFL level, you don't see guys do that anymore. He's probably not going to do it at the NFL level, right? He's probably going to be in the 5-6 yards per attempt range, because that's what almost everybody is. I went back and looked, and defenses in the NFL have really clamped down on the quarterback run game. It used to be like there were probably 10 plus guys every year at the quarterbacks who, no matter the number of attempts, right? Like, obviously the high attempt guys like Lamar and Michael Vick were more impressive, but were averaging over 6 yards per attempt. Now they're averaging in like the mid 5s, right? Which is still really good. It's still better than a running back run, but it's just not to the high level that it used to be. And I think for J.J. McCarthy, because he's not somebody who's going to have the reputation as a runner, I think, right? And this goes back to some of the implicit biases people have with players. I think you can fool the defenses a bit more often and get that rushing yards per attempt number up, right? Like, being more impactful when you choose to run.
Totally. Like, if you run 2-man against McCarthy on 3rd down, which is like a go-to stop the pass on 3rd and long, he will punish you with his legs, and that gives you a lot of options. It just kind of, we talked about these things a little bit when Josh Dobbs came in last year, about how having an effective runner and how putting yourself as +1 in the run game helps an offense and does a lot of interesting things. And it also helps when you have like an actually competent thrower, like an NFL caliber, real solid, average to above average starting caliber thrower of the football who can also run. it transforms a lot of things on the boot actions. You can do nakeds. You don't have to have protection for JJ McCarthy when you do nakeds because on a boot you don't need to have his protection is he's going to outrun the edge defender because he's that athletic.
And he can do that against the NFL level guys. Like, it's not just going to be college level guys. He can do that against the Chop Robinsons or the Dallas Terriers.
Right, and there aren't many quarterbacks who can do that. When you do the boots, I think we're going to see a lot more boots. When you do the boots, he can be his own. If you're doing a flood concept, him running can be one of the options. Just say, hey, take it off and go if there isn't anybody in the flat. Take it and take the easy yards. So that's gonna set him up as well too. So I think. Again, this isn't somebody, Jaden Daniels, that you design your run game around him, a Kyler Murray that you design your run game around him necessarily. But I do think you sprinkle it in a little bit. Certainly does a lot more than Kirk Cousins does. If nothing else, I think he brings a sort of a Dak Prescott-esque ability. Like when Dak Prescott, especially when he was young and a little bit more athletic, he just was consistently punishing teams by taking off on third down. And I think McCarthy will bring at least that. You sprinkle in the zone reads, the ability to run the occasional QB sweep or QB draw with like 4 or 5 wide or something. The ability to surprise defenses, run these sorts of different red zone packages for when you're a little bit closer and be +1 in the run game. And then you add the ability and the multiplier effect it has on the boot game and the play action passing game. I think it's a really attractive package, even if he's not, I keep saying it. He's a far cry from a Lamar, but I still think it can have like a multiplier effect on the offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dak's a good comparison because if you look at Dallas, they used him a lot with his legs on third down and in the red zone in particular early in his career, and it was really deadly. I think McCarthy can be a similar level of deadly to that just by surprising opposing defenses a little bit, but also truly having that athleticism and the ability to do it. We've kind of gone through the entire game, Nick. I don't know if there are any other tidbits that you want to hit on J.J. McCarthy here before we get out.
That's the whole scouting kit and caboodle for me. Do you have anything else you wanted to hit? I mean, you're the one who charted, 2,000 plays or whatever.
Yeah, I didn't pull the data. I've already seen impressive data from him, like play under pressure, play on third down in particular. I don't have the numbers offhand. Like, those have been pretty well circulated, though, so I feel like most people have probably seen that kind of information. He was the best player in the class on third down in terms of his ability to convert. Like, that was very clear from the data. So that's good because it's a situation we talked about in the beginning, the reputation of the Michigan offense carrying J.J. McCarthy. Well, on third down, J.J. McCarthy has to carry the offense, and he was consistently doing it, right? So you see those benefits there. Excuse me, just going back to it. Overall, I think he's a really, really impressive player.
Yeah. So in terms of translating the scouting report to actual Vikings talkers, like, do you think J.J. McCarthy starts as a rookie? Do you think he starts week 1? Do you think he starts after the bye? Part of that is what do you think of Sam Darnold, but how are you thinking about him in terms of when do you think we see him as a rookie? Because I do think, especially with this supporting cast, I think the upshot case is a Brock Purdy situation where, he isn't like a top-tier quarterback. I don't think it's fair to expect to get C.J. Stroud because there's only one C.J. Stroud, even if a man can dream. I'm not going to say you can't homer yourself into those things. But, like, I don't think he's going to hit the ground and be, a top 5 quarterback out of the gate. I do think there's a potential for a top 10-ish offense in the same way that Brock Purdy isn't a top 10 quarterback, but commands a top 10 offense year in and year out for the 49ers. So, and then, also there's obviously the downside case of like, he's not as accurate. The speed of the game is too much of an adjustment. And also the fact that he wasn't actually using his arm that much that, you can envision all sorts of scenarios. There are a million reasons why quarterbacks bust. Honestly, it's a lot easier to, half of them do, half of first round quarterbacks do. So how are you thinking about when he starts and what he looks like as a rookie if he does?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting question, and it's what everybody kind of wants to know the answer to. Unfortunately, I think it hinges on things that we can't know the answer to. Like, sorry, really struggling here with the cough.
We've been going too long. It's our commitment to you as Kindred Skulls listeners that we go until our voices give out.
No, so like if you look at the Michigan offense, they're not asking him to make the pre-snap adjustments regularly. Like he'll point out a defender here and there, especially when it's coming on a blitz. So he might have a little bit more say in protections than the sideline does. But most of the plays they're looking to sidelines for checks, right? Like he's not really regularly calling audibles at the line of scrimmage.
That's a good point.
So the ability to set protections, the ability to audible at the line of scrimmage is a huge mental load for players to learn, right? The Kevin O'Connell offense is not a simple offense, right? I think it really took until that second year for Kirk Cousins to really start to feel fully involved in the offense. And, that's something people will talk about. But with a quarterback, it depends on how the Vikings... I think it depends on how the Vikings feel about him as a player and if they'll ruin him, right? I don't think they're going to expect him to know the ins and outs of every single thing in the offense because a veteran like Kirk Cousins, I don't think, knew the ins and outs of every single thing on the offense either immediately. But if they think he's going to be able to play in the NFL, and not lose it, not see ghosts like Sam Darnold did back in the day, right, against pressure, not be completely out of his depth and use it as a growth experience rather than just, getting the guy in because Sam Darnold isn't very good. I think it could benefit him, but that's up to the Vikings coaching staff, right? I think his footwork also has to be there, right? The accuracy issues we talked about, I think those have to be fixed before they're going to want to put him in the game because footwork is is a thing where if you're not 100% on it, you will fall back on the habits you had before, right? If you're not really locked in on the improvements, it's going to regress once you get under the microscope, right? Once you get under pressure. So how he's picking up the game off the field, which isn't something we can see, and the footwork improvements, which will be something that'll be visible, in like training camp and the preseason and stuff like that, are going to be the two factors. So it wouldn't shock me if he's starting week 1, to be honest with you. I think mentally, from what I saw him in terms of being able to process, and with the growth I think he can make, I do think he has a pretty good shot of starting week 1. However, it also wouldn't shock me if it's an after the bye thing, or they go almost all of the season, depending on if Sam Darnold plays well. Right, if Sam Darnold plays poorly, it's going to happen sooner rather than later, just because of the nature of first-round quarterbacks. If Sam Darnold's playing pretty well, it could go a lot deeper into the season than after the bye, because they have an early bye this year, right? Because they play in London, and they have the bye right after that against the Jets. It's like week 6 or something like that, I want to say. I'll filibuster here when Nick looks it up. What week?
6.
6, yeah. So, maybe that's a little early, but if Sam Darnold's not playing well, I think he's in after week 6. If Sam Darnold is playing well, it might be, week 10, week 11 before he really starts to see the field.
Yeah. And again, none of us can predict this with, a ton of confidence because there's so many unknown unknowns or known unknowns. There's just a lot we don't know. So I think things that weigh in his favor to start week 1 are, 1, we know Sam Darnold, we shouldn't say we know Sam Darnold isn't good, but we have a lot of tape of Sam Darnold not being a good cornerback, including on multiple teams before us. So I don't think it's a very high bar to clear to be better than Sam Darnold. Mm-hmm. 2, we don't know. The Kevin O'Connell offense is very complicated. That's one of the things that make you think maybe it'll need to sit a little longer because Kevin O'Connell throws a lot. There's a lot of plays, and a lot of the play calls are very long. Just merely getting a play call off. And the fact that there are package plays too, so you got to be able to take 2-3 plays to the huddle and be able to call them out. And that was not something he was necessarily asked to do at Michigan. I think there's some things that are going to translate. At the same time, I feel like people rave about McCarthy's everybody you have stories to talk yourself into the intangibles of every quarterback, but particularly J.J. McCarthy, the way Harbaugh's crazy about all his guys, but the way people generally talk about J.J. McCarthy, the way his high school coaches talk about him, make you think he's the sort of Tom Brady psycho who's so football obsessive and so thinking about not just how I be the hardest worker, but how do I be the smartest worker and what type of work do I have to put in that will achieve the best outcomes for me? Those are the kinds of guys I would bet on to learn the playbook. That doesn't mean he will. It's not just a matter of, you didn't work hard enough. You didn't succeed, therefore you didn't work hard enough. It's a lot more complicated than that. But I'm willing to buy into his ability to start early based on his intangibles. But the biggest thing for me is, we talked about how pro-ready the Michigan pro-style offense set him up to be. He's got the under center footwork. He's got the play action footwork. He's got the backside dig. there were a lot of NFL passing concepts, stick, backside digs, all this sort of stuff. The 3-level floods, the 4 verts, all the playbooks that are in the McCarthy or in the Kevin O'Connell offense that he's gonna already know because he was doing that at Michigan in a way that most college quarterbacks weren't running these concepts, at least not to this level of NFL detail with the footwork matching the concept. And I think that just gives him a leg up compared to the typical rookie. Doesn't mean he will start it right away, but it just means I think he's going to come in with a little bit of, it's like a college kid coming in with a little more AP tests or whatever. So I think he's going to skip a lot of the prereqs to be able to get it. That still doesn't mean he's going to do all the work that he needs to do or do it at a high enough level to beat out Sam Darnold, but I think it'll come sooner than later.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel a little bit attacked with the doing all the AP tests and then not doing any of the work. But but no, the thing with McCarthy, and I'm going to try to keep it relatively quick. We've gone super long here and summarize it up a little bit. Is I think if he's successful at the NFL level, right? You see the good athleticism and the very good arm talent, right? Not elite in either respect, but I think very good and very good on that level. And then the processing can become the superpower, right? I think he's a very good processor for a player at the college level. I hope that translates because you see a lot more NFL concepts than like the air raiding nonsense that a lot of other teams are doing. Where like, I don't know, Caleb Williams, just from what I've seen of him, it's really hard to evaluate. Not saying any thing on Caleb, good or bad, but like it's really hard to evaluate because that offense is just nonsense compared to like what you see from the NFL. It's super deep dropback, super long stuff, right? Having that NFL level experience, I think in the Michigan offense where you're seeing a ton of NFL concepts is a leg up. Those are the 3 things for me, right? The decision making, the arm talent, and the athleticism can lead to J.J. McCarthy being a very good player. And like the under pressure play, I think, is a huge aspect of this. Like I think he is very calm under pressure and operates very well under pressure. If you see him fail, I don't think that doing too much, which we talked about a little bit as a negative, is necessarily going to see him fail. I think the accuracy is a huge question mark to me, right? Like the accuracy needs to improve a little bit for him to be a very good NFL quarterback. He could be an average NFL quarterback with some accuracy issues, I think, if he maintains his current level, but to be very good, he needs to improve the accuracy. And he could fail out by continuing to miss throws. And then it's just the overall transition to the NFL game, right? Like maybe he's not seeing it as good. Maybe he cracks under pressure a little bit more when he's in more pressure situations, which he didn't see in college, right? I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be potentially the downside to me.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see him quarterbacks, like I said, can bust for so many reasons. I can see him tapping out as like a Daniel Jones type quarterback. I think the best version of him, though, I think looks like a more athletic Dak Prescott or like a Kirk Cousins with wheels, like in the sense of like an elite processor with very precise mechanics and the ability to make full field reads in a snap and execute at a very high level while also having creativity, kind of what we have wanted for, like Kirk Cousins, but like with the things that he sucked at.
I mean, to me, that sounds like C.J. Stroud. What we think C.J. Stroud could be after his first year, like frankly.
Yeah, I think he's got different toolkit than like a stronger arm. C.J. Stroud is like. They're different. Like, what do you think? Like the best version, if the Vikings end up giving 5 years or 4 years or whatever, a big market setting extension to JJ McCarthy, what do you think the pro scouting profile looks like for JJ McCarthy? Put it that way.
I think it looks like what we thought Trevor Lawrence had the potential to have. I think it looks like what we think CJ Stroud is going to be. Frankly, that would be a good comp for me. Maybe stronger armed Brock Purdy, which is a really, really good quarterback. Like I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah,
and that's high level. That's not me saying, oh, he's going to be that. That's like if he reaches his potential and fixes those accuracy issues, that's who he can be.
Yeah. Well, like the high outcome case for Joe Burrow is Tom Brady because that's like stylistically a similar kind of player. Like, so we're not saying he's better than Trevor Lawrence right out the gate before you clip us and subject us to the Twitter hordes, but we do think. I think that's the potential is there. You're right. It's that style, that caliber of player. And I think like a stronger armed Brock Purdy or like a Trevor Lawrence living up to the hype is a quarterback you can definitely get yourself really, a CJ Stroud living up to that level of play. That's something to be very excited about, even if this being Vikings football, he might just be the next Daniel Jones. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the low end outcome is always worse, but it's a Daniel Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo type of player, I think, at the end of the day. So,
but we'll end on a high note. He's the next Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, absolutely. He's the next CJ Stroud. Some people don't even like Trevor Lawrence. It's insane to me. Like, some people are low on Trevor Lawrence. I don't get it. He's awesome.
I'm saying all this Dak Prescott praise as somebody who thinks Dak Prescott is like a top 5-ish quarterback. So I have a very, very high opinion
also
of Dak
that for me.
Some people think he's like bottom 4. So
people don't like how highly I rank Dak Prescott is how highly I rank Dak Prescott. So anyway, sorry, we going off the rails here a little bit, but we said, maybe we won't go an hour and a half. Nick, we're over the hour and a half mark by a pretty substantial margin at this point. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. And what Nick said about clipping stuff, like, honestly, if you made it this long in the podcast, I don't even care at this point. Congratulations. You listened that
fun
far.
Of us. You guys have earned the right.
Yeah, to be bad faith. You've earned the right to be bad faith. So, Nick, this was awesome. Any parting thoughts before we get out of here?
No, thank you for doing the work, man. That was like an insane amount of tape you watched and charted and went into a lot of detail on. So I think this is a really good combo and be able to pick your brain on all of it.
Yeah, by the way, you can read my scouting report on JJ McCarthy. It's out on Zone Coverage now. It came out last Wednesday. And my charting information, which will include a link to the Google Sheet where I have all of the charting data that I compiled for JJ McCarthy, will be out, I believe, next Wednesday. It'll be out sometime next week. So with that, we are Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese. You can find me at Fries Football. I'll be posting those articles for sure when they come out. You can find Nick at Nick Olson NFL. Greg is at the Gregg Blake on Instagram. Our podcast, Kindred Skulls, is at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. And with that, Skull Vikings.
I will love you. Go, baby.
The first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind, and we'll score the